secret. It's sacred, so they won't tell you about it unless you're in the temple, and, you know, to get in the temple, you've got to prove that you're, like, pure and worthy. But then there's also this kind of rule that, even if you're endowed and stuff, like, you can't talk about the temple stuff outside of the temple, like, which...
the devil's gonna hear.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? Like, so I can't just,
what's
like...
he gonna do about it?
So I can't just, like, sit and talk to my husband after going to the temple one day and be like, yeah, so that was fucking weird. Like, you know?
Well, that's it. It's... The only time you can talk about it is in, like, the celestial room.
And, like, and you're not supposed to talk in the celestial room because people are there, like, pondering and trying to have these great spiritual experiences. Like, I expected, because I think my mum had really talked up the celestial room and was like, you know what, when you get to go, like, through there, you know, really take your time and, like, be at peace in that room and just, like, try and hear the Holy Ghost and what he has to tell you. And I remember, like, every time I'd go in there, I would sit down and I would just be like, God damn, I am so hungry. Like, when can we get out of here? And as soon as John would, like, come through the door, we'd be, like, making eyes at each other, like, is it too soon to leave yet? Like, will we look like, you know, will we look like shit if we're the first ones to go?
I remember just flipping through the pages.
You'd, like, pretend to be
Bibles
reading?
they have there to make it look like I was doing something, but in fact I was thinking about the subway I was going to get down the road.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do that, or they fall asleep.
Oh, yeah.
Guilty. I did that multiple times.
Oh, damn. You weren't sleeping, you were communing with God.
Yeah, Lehi's dream. I definitely learned about Lehi's dream.
Yeah.
There's even revelation about it.
Right, so what about you, Brother Hiram? What were your shelf items? What made you leave the church?
Well, for me, it was a little bit more dramatic. Okay, so as a bit of context, so I got back from my mission, and for years I've been struggling with what they deem as a same-sex attraction. So I'm gay.
Sin.
So for years they put me through the Mormon version of conversion therapy, and essentially just changing your nature to renounce your gay ways. So that's where it got to. So came back from mission, and I was very conflicted. They called me into the bishopric, so I was the executive secretary for the bishopric. I think it said the bishop could keep an eye on me. So I came back early from my mission.
Yeah.
And so that was really conflicting, and I started to get on some gay dating apps just to talk to people, just get a feel for it. And that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So from there, I thought I want to be independent, so I booked a trip over to New Zealand. And just before I left, I met a couple of guys, went on a few dates. I didn't have sex, but I went on a few dates. And it was really super awkward because the whole time I'm like, I can't be gay, but I'm on a date with a guy.
Yeah. So was this like while you were still the exec sec in your ward?
Yes, it was.
Wow. Very scandalous.
Very scandalous.
Living life on the edge.
Yeah.
And that's it. I was living my own life on the edge. So I went to New Zealand, and I got there, and on one of the dating apps, I met this guy. And we hooked up. I tossed out my V plates, and then he ended up coming on the rest of the trip. So I was there for like 2 weeks, and we ended up being in a relationship. And part of it, one of the guys I was seeing, he was very mature, and I've been talking to him for a little while, and he was under the impression that we were in a relationship, but I'm like, not really.
You're like, that's not allowed.
Pretty much. So he posted on Facebook that we're in a relationship, and I'm like, oh, fuck's sake, here we go.
Oh, no.
Then the questions came flooding in. And anyway, it all came out. I came back, and I talked to Bishop, and I said, look, this is what I've done. And he's like, all right, we need to talk to the stake president. You're probably going to be excommunicated.
Fuck.
And then it all started unraveling from there. People found out, which was weird. I told Mum and Dad before I left New Zealand. The day before I left, I'm like, by the way, I'm gay.
Goodbye.
Because I knew I was going to do something while I was over there.
Yeah.
And I gave Dad my temple recommend. He was in the stake presidency at the time.
Right. Yeah.
So I handed him my temple recommend, and I left. And came back, it all started unraveling, and it got to the point where a couple of weeks later, I was still going. I wasn't allowed to take the sacrament. You know, they hadn't removed me from my calling.
Yeah.
Even
Even though they said, you know, you're probably going to be excommunicated, but we need you right now, so...
it was a weird situation.
Yeah.
You know, Dad spoke to them and said, all right, maybe we won't excommunicate him because he was on the stake presidency.
Yeah, right.
And because everything I'd done to help, you know, the youth in the ward and things like that, they thought that might backfire.
Right.
But all of the friends I thought I had, they started to, you know, turn on me. And they would ignore me. They wouldn't want to hang out. They, you know, they treated me like dirt. And
you might infect them.
Yeah. So I lost pretty much all the friends I thought I had. And one day I just said, I've had enough. I walked out the door and I never went back. For me, the shelf breaking part was like for a while I knew I was gay. I knew that the church didn't accept it, and I knew that, you know, the doctrine was never really a big thing. I never really was that believing. I went along with all of it just because it felt like that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, you're conditioned from when you're young, and you're in that culture and that society. And so you just go along with it and do what you need to do. But it got to the point where I'm like, fuck this, you know, this is not right, the way they're treating me. And I walked out and never turned back. Yeah. And that's what broke my shelf. Is not just the way that they treat gay people, but the way that they treat each other when, you know, they break that image of being perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's crazy that you even stayed like as long as you did, because I mean, you went on a mission and everything. Like I couldn't. Yeah, I haven't struggled with being gay in the church, but I just can't imagine how anybody could like sit through like sacrament or anything, or a conference, and have them talking about how gay marriage is a sin, and you know, like I don't know how you could stand that for so long.
And that's the thing, it's so damaging.
Yeah.
It's so traumatic, you know, dealing with that for years, and, you know, you're having to tell yourself that you're not worthy because you're having these thoughts, and that you can't act on that, and you can't be that. Like, I remember, you know, endless nights crying in bed, accepting that I was never going to get married, that I was never going to be happy, that I would have someone assigned to me in the afterlife because I'm gay here, and I just have to accept that.
Is that sort of what you believed? Like when you would die eventually, like your gayness would be cured and suddenly you'd be able to be happy with a woman?
Pretty much, yeah. Like I toyed with the idea of getting married, but then I said, well, I'm not going to lie to someone. I'm not going to say, look, I'm gay, but I'm not going to tell you, and we're just going to live a life and have kids and be happy, because I knew I wasn't going to be happy. Yeah. And that was very conflicting morally. Because you know, especially if you're going to marry someone, you don't want to lie to them your whole life. That's horrible.
Like, I guess for me, like a lot of, you know, my shelf breaking stuff was like, I don't want to live a life that I'm not happy with just for the idea of happiness in the afterlife. And for you, it would be like that times a million, because, you know, you can't even be like with somebody that you love for your entire lifetime. Like, I can't imagine how damaging that would be to somebody's just your overall life satisfaction. Like, if you can't be with the person that you love, like.
And well, that's it. I remember early days, like, you know, mid high school, when Facebook and MySpace was becoming a thing.
Oh yeah, what a time to be alive.
Do you remember Bebo? Anyway, so I was scrolling through. I think it was Bebo. I was scrolling through one day, and I saw, you know, two guys about the same age as me holding hands, walking down the road. And for me, that was the absolute turning point where I in my heart, I'm like, I want that. Yeah. And that's when I realised that, okay, I think I'm gay. And, you know, I tried to push it down for so many years, and then it got to the point of where that happened. Like, on my mission, I was so conflicted, so depressed, and so struggling so much that I confided in my companion and our two flatmates at the time. Yeah. How I was feeling. They were super supportive, but one of them, he was seeing the church counsellor. He mentioned it.
Yeah.
Then he mentioned to the mission president. The mission president came storming in, and he's like, if you mention to one more person, I'm going to send you home. And he threatened all four of us that if we were to talk about it, we'd be sent home. And it was just absolutely horrible. You know, the way that he's like, well, I don't want anyone finding out, because if any of the Utah mothers find out, they're going to, you know, want you sent home and want me sent home, and nobody can know about this. You cannot talk about it.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the end for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I knew then that I don't want to be part of something so thuggery.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just horrible. And that's where I got the biggest crack in my shelf.
Yeah.
Was when one of the people that I trusted the most on my mission turned around and told me that I was wrong.
Yeah.
And told me that I was wrong for being who I am, and for trying to be honest and open with my companion, the person who I'm supposed to trust and get along with.
Yeah.
And from there, it was just all downhill. You know, I went into a bit of a depression spiral and anxiety spiral, and I ended up going home within the month.
Yeah.
And then came back, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I look back now, and walking out that day was the best decision of my life.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
It's been a difficult road. I still face trauma. I go to counselling every few weeks.
Yeah.
I have been for the last 6 years. Just to try and deal with what happened in the church.
Yeah.
And I would never go back. And that's the thing. I haven't even been back to church since.
Yeah.
I think I drove to the car park once to drop some keys off to Dad.
I mean, I can't imagine you'd ever want to. Like, I remember, you know, when we were having that whole gay marriage plebiscite in Australia, you know, the church really, like, everyone, you know, in church was encouraging us to vote no, because marriage is between a man and a woman and blah, blah, blah. And I remember kind of thinking, I'm like, well, there's no fucking gay people in the church anyway, because why would you want to stay in a church that's denying you, like, you know, so, like, why, you know, like, and so I was, like, confused as well, I think, because there was, like, a whole bunch of rallies, I think, in Utah, maybe around the same time, or maybe even a bit later, where...
I think it was Proposition 5 or something, from memory. I'm not 100%.
I don't know, somebody, like, for some reason there was a lot of, like, rallies and stuff going on in Utah where, like, you know, more, like, gay Mormons were like, you know, we want to be able to be sealed in the temple. And I was just like, man, how have you, like, stayed in the church this long? Like, to be old enough to be married? Because, yeah, like, I couldn't imagine, like, you know, there were things in the church that I disagreed on, sure, and looking back, like, I can see more now, like, the ways that it affected me personally and, like, sexism and stuff, but, like, to be a member of the church and have that church tell you that who you are is wrong and that God won't accept you and that you can't have all of these blessings, like, it would just drive me insane. Like, I don't... Yeah.
And, like, it's no comparison at all. And I'm not meaning to make a comparison, but you look at when black men were not able to have the priesthood. You know, I can get a glimpse into how that would have felt.
Yeah.
And, you know, the segregation behind it is just absolutely horrific. And like I said, it's no comparison at all. You know, racism never compares. But, you know, the way that the church treats people and disowns people that don't fit within their boxes. Yeah, it's horrific. You know, I don't get contacted very often from people from church anymore, which isn't a bad thing. But yeah, there was like one or two people that would actually reach out to me to genuinely see how I was doing. I think it was like last year when I was living at Mum and Dad's. Yeah, some of my old friends they kept a little bit in contact, but they started inviting me over to some YSA activities. Yeah. And I took Michael along. All right, yeah. And
I love that.
That's cool.
And then they were fine. They're like, yeah, cool. And then it was just really boring, so we stopped going.
Naturally.
So that's essentially what broke my shelf is, you know, having these people tell me that I cannot be happy and that my happiness is wrong. That is the biggest shelf breaker I've had. Because nobody determines what makes me happy, and I know within myself that if God is real, and I'm not 100%